Back in the spring of 1968, Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey premiered across the country, and the reactions were nothing short of chaos. At the New York premiere, people walked out in droves, even executives from MGM, the very studio behind the film. Those who stuck around? Yeah, they weren't exactly clapping. Kubrick, just shy of 40, had come a long way from his Bronx roots. He started as a photographer, worked his way into Hollywood, and made a name for himself. His last big hit, Dr. Strangelove, was 4 years in the rearview, and right now, it was looking like 2001 might be less visionary masterpiece and more career fumble. One guy walking out of the theater summed it up best. Well, that's one man's opinion. 2001. A Space Odyssey is a long movie, even after Stanley Kubrick trimmed it down following some rough early screenings. In a way, it almost dares you to sit through it. Not because there's a lot of story packed in, but because Kubrick stretches out the few action-packed moments as much as possible. One critic described it as floating somewhere between hypnotic and painfully slow. And then there was the comment about how it seemed tailor-made for a stoned audience. Because, well, that's exactly what happened. By the late 60s, America was deep in the counterculture movement, and a certain kind of moviegoer embraced 2001 in a way no one had expected. Hippies flocked to theaters, many of them high, completely mesmerized by Kubrick's surreal vision. David Bowie later admitted he smoked cannabis before watching it. Others took it a step further, dropping acid to sync their trips with the film's visuals. One wild story from an LA screening claims a man, overwhelmed by what he was seeing, ran straight through the movie screen, shouting, "It's God!" At first, 2001 wasn't playing in every theater. Only a handful of locations had the 70mm prints projected on massive curved screens. MGM thought they had another Dr. Zhivago or Ben-Hur, a grand, sweeping epic. What they got instead was an audience filled with fans of underground cult films like The Trip, movies that leaned into psychedelic editing and experimental visuals. And then came the Stargate sequence, that famous moment where the protagonist soars through a tunnel of shifting neon colors. People figured out how to sync their hallucinations with it, turning the movie into a full-blown experience. Eventually, MGM got the message. All that serious, highbrow marketing, they toned it down. Instead, new posters went up with a bold, new tagline, "The Ultimate Trip." Kubrick and Clark, both captivated by the mysteries of space, wanted to create something that felt truly limitless. That meant building an entirely new kind of special effects movie, one that demanded an almost obsessive level of detail. But in the beginning, his goal was much simpler. He just wanted to make a really good science fiction movie. He reached out to Arthur C. Clarke, a well-respected sci-fi writer living in Ceylon, with a simple but intriguing question. Why do we believe in aliens? And what would actually happen if we found them? Their first concept was a space mission to the Moon and Mars, but that eventually shifted to Jupiter. And the timing of Kubrick's letter in 1964 hints at something even bigger. He was watching NASA's race to the moon with growing concern. What if real-life space travel made his movie feel outdated before it even came out? But Kubrick had something reality didn't. He could show space in stunning color and sound on a massive screen. If he did it right, the grainy black and white footage of the moon landing on TV would feel almost unimpressive by comparison. Clarke was the perfect collaborator. A radar expert and a major figure in the British Interplanetary Society, he was a serious sci-fi writer who could balance scientific accuracy with imagination. Kubrick had a challenge for him. If you can describe it, I can film it. That set the tone for their partnership. Since there wasn't an existing book that fit Kubrick's vision, they decided to write a novel first. When they weren't working, Clarke taught Kubrick how to use a slide rule and showed him his telescope. They also devoured everything they could about alien life. At one point, Clarke excitedly noted in his diary that Kubrick was convinced the Russians had discovered radio signals from space. It turned out to be nothing, but Kubrick was so paranoid about someone else beating him to the story that he even tried to take out an insurance policy, just in case real aliens were discovered before his film was finished. The world of 2001 had to be built from the ground up, and one of their biggest challenges was figuring out how to make emptiness look interesting. They found inspiration in a Canadian film called Universe, which used ink and paint in liquid solutions to create cosmic effects. By slowing the footage down, it looked just like galaxies forming. To bring authenticity to the film, Kubrick brought in space experts Harry Lang and Frederick Ordway, along with model makers, architects, furniture designers, and even boat builders. The production was so detailed that someone from NASA jokingly called their studio NASA East. Every element, from spacesuits to control panels, was meticulously designed, making it hard to tell where the movie ended and reality began. Stanley Kubrick approached 2001, A Space Odyssey, like a historian documenting a time that hadn't even happened yet. He wasn't just guessing what the future might look like, he studied it. The 1964 World's Fair gave him ideas, and an article called Home of the Future provided more inspiration. Tony Masters, the film's designer, realized they weren't just imagining a sci-fi setting, they were creating an entire era, the way you'd categorize Georgian or Victorian styles. Every detail mattered, down to the last piece of silverware. But Kubrick wasn't just thinking about aesthetics, he was playing a long game. He knew that by the time 2001 actually arrived, people would compare reality to his vision. So, he made sure to get it right. Big brands like Whirlpool and Macy's got involved, lending their designs to the film. Some of those futuristic-looking products ended up influencing real-world designs, so when the actual 2001 rolled around, parts of the world looked eerily like his movie. Of course, not everything in the film lined up with reality. Space travel in 2001 was sleek and luxurious, but when the International Space Station finally launched, it was a far cry from Kubrick's vision, more cramped and utilitarian than a floating Hilton. Still, his aesthetic left a mark here on Earth. Those striking red chairs from the set became design icons, and plenty of modern apartments and hotels borrowed the film's sleek, futuristic look. For audiences expecting a typical sci-fi adventure, 2001 was something else entirely. The story, surprisingly simple. Early humans stumble upon a mysterious black monolith right around the time they figure out how to use tools. Fast forward to 2001, and another one is found on the moon, beaming signals toward Jupiter. By the end, yet another monolith shows up, marking a whole new leap in evolution. But Kubrick wasn't just painting a picture of the future. He was laying out how humanity has always been caught between where it's been and where it's going next. The astronauts? They're in this weird limbo, stuck between the primitive tool wielders of the past and whatever the star child at the end is supposed to be. To make the Dawn of Man sequence feel real, the team went to Namibia, photographing the desert for reference. Back in England, they built an elaborate projection system to turn their set into prehistoric Africa. The actors playing early humans were actually dancers and mimes in meticulously designed costumes. Even the animals were carefully controlled. Some were real, while others were made to look the part, like a dead horse painted to resemble a zebra. For Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite, the film's wild, abstract finale, Kubrick's scientific advisor, Fred Ordway, read a study about theology students who took psychedelic mushrooms before attending a church service. Many reported having religious experiences. Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke researched everything carefully, but maybe they could have skipped a few steps if they'd been willing to try psychedelics themselves, though both were known to be pretty straight-laced. Those wild, brain-melting Jupiter scenes weren't just special effects, they changed the game. The crew had to get creative, inventing new techniques like the slit scan method to pull off that trippy Stargate sequence. Normally used for cityscape photography, they flipped it to create those hypnotic tunnels of color and light. Watching it feels like getting yanked into a psychedelic vortex. So intense, it became one of the most iconic moments in movie history. But for all the high-tech visuals, some of the film's biggest creative risks were its simplest choices. The biggest challenge? Figuring out how to show aliens. At the time, sci-fi movies were full of bizarre creatures, giant birds, scaly monsters, amorphous blobs. Kubrick and Clarke sketched ideas, studied surrealist paintings, and even experimented with clay sculptures made by Kubrick's wife. None of them felt right. At one point, they considered making the aliens thin and shadowy, but ultimately, Kubrick decided on something completely different. the monolith. A simple black, featureless slab. No eyes, no limbs, just an eerie, imposing presence. And yet, it worked. The monolith forced audiences to feel the same awe and terror that the characters did. Kubrick understood that sometimes the unknown is far more powerful than any elaborate creature design. And then there's HAL 9000, the smooth-voiced, eerily calm AI that sees everything through its glowing red eye. IBM initially consulted on HAL's design, but they distanced themselves once they realized Kubrick was turning him into a psychotic computer. HAL is one of the most chilling villains in film history, not because he rages or threatens, but because he's quiet, logical, and disturbingly human. His voice is gentle, almost soothing, but his words carry a creeping sense of menace. And yet, HAL's final moments are among the most emotional in the film. As Dave disconnects him, HAL regresses, his intelligence slipping away. His last words are a song, Daisy Bell, something his teacher once taught him. In that moment, he isn't just a machine. He's like a scared child, slowly fading away. Ironically, HAL feels more human than the astronauts, who are stiff and mechanical in their own way. Stanley Kubrick's 2001. A Space Odyssey wasn't just a movie, it was a puzzle handed over to the audience without a clear solution. For years, Kubrick and writer Arthur C. Clarke struggled to pin down what the film was even about. They debated, revised, and reimagined, but in the end, they left many of the biggest questions unanswered, trusting the audience to wrestle with the meaning themselves. One critic described 2001 as the first major movie that made people constantly try to figure it out. It wasn't just that the story was complex, it was that the film seemed to expect its audience to be okay with confusion. On set, every tiny detail was carefully controlled. Experts worked on precise technical elements, following Kubrick's constantly shifting vision. The film seemed to be building towards some grand, climactic revelation, yet Kubrick kept changing his mind about what that revelation should even be. Then, when the film finally premiered, audiences didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't like other sci-fi films of the time. No hand-holding, no neat explanations, no easy answers. It expected you to sit with the mystery, not rush to solve it. And even if you watched it again, it didn't suddenly make sense. You just got better at being confused. But over time, the confusion became part of its legend. More than that, 2001 defined Kubrick's approach to filmmaking. The obsession with precision, the way visuals took priority over traditional storytelling, the calculated movements of actors, the bold color palettes, the way he used space and silence, all of it became part of his signature. You see it in Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, Eyes Wide Shut, every one of them stamped with that unmistakable Kubrick touch. And the pacing? Classic Kubrick. The way 2001 made massive stretches of time feel fleeting while stretching tiny moments into eternity. It became one of his trademarks. And don't even get started on the music. The score didn't just back up the action, it shaped it, sometimes even mocked it. He played with this in Dr. Strangelove, but in 2001, it fully came alive. Kubrick had always loved old sci-fi and eerie radio dramas as a kid, but 2001 was something entirely different. It was an event, a spectacle, something closer to the earliest days of cinema. Film historians talk about those first silent films as a cinema of attraction, movies that were less about storytelling and more about showing off what film could do. Simple scenes, like a train pulling into a station or a dog playing, were enough to captivate audiences because the magic wasn't in the story. It was in the fact that moving images could even be captured at all. Kubrick left us with a film that invites endless debate, so let's keep that going. Drop your wildest 2001 theory in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.